So thank you for having me. My name is Jason Gardner. I'm founder and CEO of Marqeta. We are an issuer processor, core processor based out of Oakland, California. Have 180 people. Actually just brought on a head of European strategy and also hired our first employee in Europe based out of Manchester, England. So when I was asked to do the keynote, I was really thinking about what would make sense from a payments perspective to talk about in Germany, and I thought probably cashless was probably a really great place to start. So the Bundesbank did a survey in 2017. It was actually the first time in history that cash transactions went below 50%. They're at 47.6%. Card transactions at 39.4%. So what's interesting about that is you see many places across the world where actually cashless is becoming a reality. And what I've said in the past is that cash is almost an endangered species of sorts. So we heard from India pulling 500,000 rupee bills out of circulation. Apple Pay transactions up 450%. Year over year and growing. We're seeing this at Samsung Pay and Android Pay as well. Sweden within Europe is definitely leading the race for cashless. We're seeing this in the Nordics. We're seeing this in UK. We're seeing this in Canada. We're seeing this in the States. It's really growing pretty significantly. We're also seeing the rise of crypto and P2P transactions. Really an amazing opportunity that we're seeing really across the globe where this is beginning to take place. And then companies like Square, who undoubtedly created a brand new category on the acquiring side, which is the idea of mobile POS. And we see companies like iZettle here in Europe, which have been incredibly successful. So where I thought we'd start is what we call purchase finance. This is not unusual within Europe. We've seen this for some time. This is actually pretty new within the States. The way it used to work was you would go up to the point of sale, and while standing in line with about 20 people behind you, you're filling out some information so you can get a private label credit card. You can do a single transaction, and that card would show up maybe 5 to 10 business days later. So what we're seeing is this idea of using a mobile phone. You walk into a merchant, you sign up for your information, you get instantly approved, and this generates a virtual card. That virtual card is then dropped into Apple Pay, Android Pay, Samsung Pay, really without any interaction at the point of sale. So you're walking into a store, you have a specific budget, maybe you see something that you want to buy that's more expensive than the cash that you have in your wallet or your purse, and you decide that you want to have a different opportunity to get your goods and services. So this is a great opportunity for retailers to be able to step in and provide these types of services. Again, we've seen this in Europe, but it's really around the globe. We're seeing this more and more. In fact, we partnered with Alipay in the US. You have 31 million Chinese people visiting the US every year and leveraging their Alipay accounts back home. So being able to drop that, have that card or take a picture of it, of a QR code, and initiate these transactions. And then the transaction is approved. So once the transaction is approved, you're getting a lot of information from the consumer, which gives you the ability to reach out to that person. You're seeing data about their specific purchases at that retailer, and then there's this sort of online to offline drive to bring them back in store across numerous retailers. So purchase financing wins, and why I'm focused on purchase financing is this is a very simple opportunity to bring instant issuance virtual card, whether it's Visa or MasterCard here in Europe, and then drop that into Apple Pay or Android Pay. We're seeing where the ability of NFC transactions mobile transactions really begin to grow within Europe. A store can sell more goods. The consumer is having access to much higher ticket items, walking around with sort of wads of cash in their pockets. And the lender has a new customer. So again, where that lender works across multiple retailers in a specific region, they can really set a pretty exciting relationship up with them. You create a new habit. We all know about PSD2 and access to data. So Marqeta being an API-driven platform, getting access to that data, being able to mine that data on behalf of the consumer, really kind of changes the game around how a merchant can interact. And then repeat revenue obviously drives profit. So traditional issuing processing has been built for banks, and this is, I'm going to have a couple slides on Marqeta. But we've seen for some time that if you wanted to go build a credit card, a debit card, or a prepaid card, whether that's actually physical plastic or even tokenized now within the mobile wallets, you would typically go to a bank to access that. So we've sort of turned that on its head. We're the first company ever in the issuing processing space. We're a core processor to really create this open API. So if a company wants to build a credit, debit, or prepaid card, they can come in really 30 seconds, create a sandbox, and begin building that. That's really fundamentally different than we have experienced in the past, where if you wanted to build a card, you went to a bank, and working with that bank and almost working to translate sort of the needs of startups or larger companies into specifically how can I create a product, whether it's a credit, debit, or prepaid card, and something that's specifically about my business. So we've seen really the rise of APIs or application program interfaces since 2010. We're seeing them really throughout the world, and where we focused on has been specifically issuing and processing. So what's different and how we've looked at it, we're also the first company of its kind to create the ability where our customers are actually authorizing their own transactions. So there's a fundamental shift of the system of record, which would typically reside with the issuer processor. We've now moved that primary system of record to our customers. So what does that mean? A transaction is initiated at the point of sale, whether it's online or offline. That ISO 8583 message is sent over the internet to an endpoint, whether it's Visa, MasterCard, or Discover. It sits inside of our data center. We then take that ISO 8583 message, we repackage it in a development language or computer language called JSON. And we actually deliver it to our customer. So our customer is now parsing that ISO 8583 message, which has been reformatted. They are synchronously making a call out to us, whether to authorize, decline, or partially approve that transaction. And then obviously we send the message back to the point of sale. Once that message hits the point of sale, we're sending information directly over what's called a webhook to our customer, which could be a message generated within the consumer's mobile app, or maybe it's information that can be tied back to the system of record from an accounting perspective. Think of this as like AWS or Amazon Web Services for issuing and processing, where really any company of any size can now become their own issuer processor without having to build, maintain, from a regulatory perspective, et cetera, their own infrastructure. So again, we're the first of its kind to build an API, a native API for issuing and processing. We are operating natively in the US, which means that we house infrastructure within the US. We're operating natively within Canada. And in the second half of 2018, we'll be operating natively within the European Union. We're very excited about that. So Around issuing and processing and this access to data really gives this idea of transaction visibility. So obviously when your customers, if you're a merchant in the room or an acquirer, you're not having that interaction at the point of sale with the customer. Cash really negates that relationship. And I think in the digital age, especially around mobile phones, when a consumer walks in the store, there's this great opportunity to engage with them on many different levels. The payment or the transaction on a card, whether it's credit, debit, or prepaid, is really initiating that. And that drives a lot of data for merchants, for acquirers to provide that data, and then also, frankly, data for the consumer. So they can be able to use that data for different purposes, whether it's managing their household, managing their budgets, etc. The ability to authorize your own transactions as an end customer really gives you that fine-grained control. So, a typical system of record in a issuer processor is really like an accounting engine of sorts, but the system of record at a customer can have all kinds of information. It can have longitude, latitude information from a mobile app on a phone. Can have a history of transactions or up-to-date balances in regards to how that transaction would be authorized, or maybe even applying discounts at the point of sale, things like that, to obviously engage the customer. APIs drive innovations and flexibility, and then ideas as modern infrastructure, modern development languages, modern hardware, far more easier to maintain, far more easier to deploy, and less expensive to support. So again, Marqeta is ready and focused to enter the European market in 2018. Again, we're very excited about that. In fact, my first real sort of entree into consumer space. Obviously, consumers far more regulated than the commercial space. But we're getting more and more into that, especially with building out credit. It's a kind of a new space for us from a BIN perspective, but we're building out servicing and underwriting as well, which we see obviously enormous opportunities around co-branding of cards in this sort of fundamentally new model for issuing.
Time for one more question.
All right, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jason.